basically not, I'm in the weird corner of the Myers-Briggs chart. Like I really am in one of the small percent categories. And basically what that means is I'm sort of a provocateur. In other words, I won't exactly say I'm a reactionary. I like technology, but I kind of want to understand why we're making the technology and not just make it for its own sake. So in other words, for me, for example, the course of our research has been stimulated heavily by other questions that weren't technical. They were questions about things just like, when did it become obvious that data about you is somebody else's property? I suppose it always was. In other words, it's always been true in America. Thank goodness, you know, we have First Amendment and you could all go out on a public street and take a picture. That's fine. But it's a little bit more subtle, I think, when you have the ability to track and correlate your credit card interactions, which apparently are somebody else's property to sift through, and the position and use of your car, which apparently also is somebody else's property that they're able to track and sift through. And so what I'm saying is I suppose any one of these changes, I could go on with a list like that, any one of these changes, I guess sort of follows naturally from what we're doing, but it's not obvious why. Ride sharing is another one I don't understand. I'm fairly certain that some decades ago, if you and I had jumped in my car and started soliciting people on the street to, hey, jump in, I'll drive you somewhere, you pay me, I'm pretty certain that was a misdemeanor of some kind, and I wasn't allowed to do that. There was a reason for the medallion system. I'm not telling you it's good or bad, I'm just saying society had worked out some plan. Taxis were going to be monitored in some way. You can argue about whether or not it worked or not and all, but there was some plan. And we just decided not to do that anymore. And that didn't have anything to do with any legislative acts that I could see. It just was a force like a hurricane basically decided to change that. I wonder about that, and it's changed how our research has gone. The non-intrusive monitor, for example, that we work on now has been specifically designed to go after what I think is the failed model for looking at power data, and we're looking at a different way. The failed model is the one where you put in a meter, I think it's fair to say, and try to move that information back to a server. So in other words, if I'm Mr. Power and I'm going to try to aggregate all the data from meters and then make a business out of that, that bothers me a little. It bothers me. It may be true that that data isn't mine. It's the utility's meter. But I'm not sure why somebody gets to sift through that and start to figure out things about me, and it may be the fact that they can, but I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that. Our model is different. Our model is, and it makes more economic sense, I think. A lot of those Mr. Power models have failed because it turns out to be expensive to move the data from a house back to a server farm. And then when you've got this ocean of data, figuring out what to do with it is also not so easy. We've directed our research to systems that don't move data. The data stays on the computer in your house. It's yours. What I want to give you is an app market. In other words, if you want to find out something about your power consumption, you can give me the data if you want to, but you have to decide to do that, and then I might do something with it for you if you want me to. But the other thing that I'd like to be able to do is offer you an app back, just the same way you've got one for your MP3 player. I'd like to be able to offer you a piece of software back that you own or that you use, and that's used on the data that for sure you own. And it tells you what it is you want to know. How often is my refrigerator running? Is it running more than last month? Does it look like it's breaking? Tell me the answer. Tell me the answer. Not Mr. Power, right? Me. I want to know the answer. Then, if I'm bothered, I have the choice at that point. Now I can go, gee, Mr. Power, I'm confused. The thing's going from green to red through yellow. It's yellow right now. I'm worried. Or no, I don't care. Or I don't even want to know about it. But that was my choice. Do you follow me then? A lot of our research has been directed at figuring out ways to empower the operators of the systems to understand their system better. Same thing on the Coast Guard cutter. We don't want to send the information back to a defense contractor unless the Coast Guard wants to. I don't mind if they do. I just want them to decide. Do you follow me? And if they want to look at it, I don't see why they shouldn't be allowed to look at it if they want to. And so we've spent a lot of the architecture of our systems, without trying to get too nerdy, is designed to not force a model on people and to open up provocative other models that we don't seem to be looking at right now. You know, I see a world possible where all your appliances are going to come with IoT dongles in them. Somebody else, if you will, some large company is going to be collecting information about when you made a margarita with your blender, when you used your stove, what you cooked. Why is that their business? Why do I have to buy? In fact, it's reaching the point where if it's even possible, I'm going to be charged more for a blender that doesn't report what I'm doing than a blender that does. Why is that right? You know, so I'm not trying to start an argument. All I'm trying to say is those provocative questions have led us to think about the technology and what technology you would need. You realize, no, I don't just want a power meter that connects up to a large corporation through a big network. Maybe I want a power meter that stores the data and never transmits it to anyone, or that lets me decide. And that's led us to different inventions, basically, I hope, fair word to say, or trying to innovate to come up with systems that let you practice other business models.